The rain had been falling since morning, soft and endless, painting the small city of Portland in shades of gray. Emily Cooper stood by the kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the ticking of the clock felt heavy. Ryan hadn't texted her all day. He was supposed to come home early, was Friday, but his message came late, the same as always. Working late, don't wait up. She read it twice, then placed her phone face down on the counter. It wasn't anger she felt, just a dull ache. They used to wait for each other, talk for hours about small, silly things. Their words were few, their smiles polite. 7 years of marriage, and it felt like they were living parallel lives that only brushed past each other at dinner. That night, Emily sat on the couch, flipping through their old photo album. She ran her fingers over a picture of them on their honeymoon in Maui sunlight in their hair. Ocean behind them, laughter frozen in time. Back then, Ryan couldn't go an hour without touching her hand, whispering something sweet. He used to send her texts in the middle of meetings just to say he missed her. Now, days went by with nothing but short replies and tired excuses. She sighed and closed the album. It wasn't that Ryan had become cold, he still said good. Morning still asked how her day was, but there was something missing in his voice. Like he was speaking from a distance. Sometimes she caught him staring at his phone with a faint smile, one she hadn't seen directed at her in months. Emily didn't want to be suspicious, but her heart whispered things she didn't want to hear. Maybe it was just work stress. Maybe he was unhappy. Maybe she had stopped being the woman he fell in love with. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Ryan's birthday was next week, and Emily decided she would do something special, something to remind him of who they were. Before life became a checklist of responsibilities, she wanted him to remember the girl who used to make him laugh until he cried, the woman he once called his best friend. She took out a notebook and started planning. A dinner at home, candlelight, his favorite food, grilled steak, mashed potatoes, red wine, a small cake, chocolate with caramel drizzle, and a gift, something meaningful. For days she searched through old boxes in the attic, pulling out photos, letters, and small memories, a seashell from their first trip, a movie ticket from there. First date, a note he had written saying, "I'm lucky you said yes." She decided to put them all together in a scrapbook, something personal, something he wouldn't expect. Each night after Ryan went to bed, she stayed up working on it. The soft hum of the heater was her only companion as she cut, pasted, and wrote small captions beside each memory. With every page, she felt closer to him again, as if rebuilding the story of their love could somehow bring it back to life. But even as she planned the surprise, doubt kept creeping in. Ryan came home later and later. Sometimes he smelled faintly of perfume not hers. When she asked how his day was, he always said, "Busy, just meetings." His eyes didn't meet hers anymore. And when she reached out to touch his hand, he pulled away too soon, as if distracted by thoughts she couldn't reach. Still, Emily kept her hope alive. She told herself that people drift sometimes, but love could always find its way back if you tried hard enough. She wanted to believe that effort still mattered. One afternoon, while Ryan was at work, Emily went shopping for decorations. She bought white candles, red roses, and a navy blue dress, the same shade she'd worn on their second anniversary. When he told her she looked like the first day of spring, she wanted that moment back. The look in his eyes, the way he held her close and said he couldn't believe how lucky he was. On the way home, she passed by a small cafe where they used to go on lazy Sundays. Without thinking, she stepped inside. The same old couple sat near the window, laughing over coffee. Emily smiled faintly, but felt her chest tighten. She remembered sitting there with Ryan years ago, sharing one slice of cheesecake, talking about dreams they hadn't yet lived. Now, even silence between them felt like walls. That evening, as she folded laundry, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed older, not from age, but from weariness. "Maybe I stopped trying," she whispered to herself. Maybe we both did. The next day, Ryan came home late again. Emily waited for him at the table. Dinner cold, candles burned out. When he walked in, she smiled softly and asked, "Everything okay at work?" He nodded quickly, not meeting her eyes. "Just busy, Em. Big project." She wanted to ask more, but something in his tone made her stop. Instead, she said, "Your birthday's coming up. I'm planning something small. Just us." He gave a tired smile. "If you don't have to go through the trouble." "It's not trouble," she replied quietly. "It's important to me." That night, after he went to bed, Emily sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer through the rain. She thought about how love could fade so quietly that one day you wake up and don't recognize your own marriage. She wondered if all couples went through this quiet drifting, this slow disappearance of closeness. But she wasn't ready to lose him. Not to time, not to distance, and certainly not to silence. So she worked harder on his surprise, putting the final touches on the scrapbook, wrapping it in simple brown paper tied with a red ribbon. On the last page, she wrote a note. "No matter how far apart we drift, I'll always remember the man who made me believe in love." She closed it gently, her fingers trembling slightly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world felt still, as if waiting. Emily didn't know that the surprise she was planning so carefully would reveal more than she ever expected. For now, she only knew one thing: she still loved him. And she hoped when he saw what she had done, maybe he would remember that he once loved her too. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered a warning. Almost a premonition that the night she meant to save their love might be the night everything changed forever. Ryan's birthday arrived on a cool Saturday evening. The sky outside their house glowed with the faint orange of sunset, and the rain from the past few days had finally cleared. Emily moved through the kitchen like someone carrying both hope and fear. The smell of steak filled the air, the candles flickered on the dining table, and soft music played from the small speaker near the window. Everything looked perfect, or at least she wanted it to be. She had spent all day preparing. She ironed the navy blue dress, curled her hair the way Ryan liked, and added a hint of the perfume he once said reminded him of their honeymoon. The photo scrapbook, wrapped in brown paper with a red ribbon, sat at the center of the table. It wasn't an expensive gift, but it held something more valuable: their story, their memories, their years together. As the clock neared 7, Emily glanced at her phone. Still no message? Ryan was supposed to be home by now. She felt that familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she got every night he came home late. She lit another candle, sat down for a moment, and told herself to stay calm. Maybe he had stopped for something. Maybe he'd forgotten the time. At 7:30, the sound of keys turning in the door broke the silence. Ryan stepped inside wearing his usual gray coat, looking a little surprised to see the warm light spilling from the dining room. "Emily," he said softly. She turned to him with a smile that was half joy, half nerves. "Happy birthday." His eyes moved around the room, the candles, the food, the soft music. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, maybe guilt or maybe surprise. "You did all this for me?" "Of course," she said, walking over to him. "It's your birthday. I wanted it to feel special." Ryan hesitated before pulling her into a quick hug. He smelled faintly of cologne, not the one he usually wore. Emily noticed it, but didn't say anything. Instead, she took his coat and guided him to the table. Dinner started quietly. Emily tried to keep the conversation light, asking about his day, his projects, the new manager at his office. Ryan answered, but his tone was distant, his smile strained. Every few minutes his phone buzzed on the table, lighting up with messages. Each time he flipped it over quickly, pretending not to notice. Emily's heart beat faster with every vibration. She wanted to ask who it was, but she didn't want to ruin the evening. She told herself, not tonight, not on his birthday. When they finished eating, Emily stood up and said, "Wait here. I have something for you." She returned with the small wrap box and placed it in front of him. "This is your real gift." Ryan smiled awkwardly. "You didn't have to get me anything." "I wanted to," she said quietly. He tore the paper gently, revealing the scrapbook. His smile faded as he turned the pages. Their wedding photo, their first apartment, the trip to Seattle, their anniversary dinner. Each page held small notes she'd written in her neat handwriting. Our first road trip. You said you'd never get tired of my terrible singing. You laughed so much that day. Ryan didn't speak. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through more pages. When he reached the last one, he paused. The note she'd written stared back at him. No matter how far apart we drift, I'll always remember the man who made me believe in love. For a moment, the room was completely silent. The candles flickered softly between them. Emily, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked at him, her heart thudding. What is it? He closed the book and took a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you. Her stomach tightened. What do you mean? He looked down at the table, unable to meet her eyes. I didn't plan for it to happen. I swear I didn't. It just did. Emily's voice trembled. Ryan, what are you talking about? He finally looked up, guilt written across his face. There's someone else. A woman at work. It started as friendship, just conversations. I didn't think much of it, but it turned into something I couldn't control. Emily froze. The sound of the rain outside began again, soft but steady, filling the silence. She couldn't speak at first. Her hands rested on the table, cold and still. How long? She asked finally, her voice low and calm, almost too calm. About 3 months, he said quietly. It wasn't serious, I swear. I ended it. But I can't keep pretending nothing happened. Emily nodded slowly, staring at the table. The candles blurred in her vision. She wasn't sure if she wanted to cry or scream, but no tears came. Only a deep, hollow ache. You ended it, she repeated softly. Yes, he said. I knew it was wrong. I've hated myself every day since. But I had to tell you. You deserve the truth. She looked up at him then, not with anger, but with something sadder. The truth, she said quietly, hurts more than the lies sometimes. Ryan reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. Emily, please. I didn't mean to lose us. I was lost. Work was stressful. I was lonely. Lonely, she interrupted, her voice shaking. You had me, Ryan. I was right here. I was waiting for you every night. Making dinner, hoping you'd talk to me. You weren't lonely. You were distracted. He lowered his head. You're right. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Emily stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the streetlights shimmered on the wet road. She watched the reflections dance, her mind spinning with memories' laughter. Promises, small moments of love that now felt like distant echoes. She didn't shout. She didn't throw things. The silence between them said everything words couldn't. After a long moment, she turned around. You know, she said softly, I thought this night would bring us closer. That's why I did all this. I wanted to remind you of who we were. I wanted you to remember me. Ryan's voice cracked. I do remember you. I never stopped. Key, she said. But somewhere along the way, you forgot how to love me. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised her hand gently. Don't say anything. I'm too tired to hear excuses tonight. She blew out the candles one by one, leaving only the soft light from the street lamp outside. Then she picked up the scrapbook and placed it back in his hands. Keep it, she said quietly. Maybe one day, when you look at these pictures, you'll remember what you lost. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. Emily, please. But she walked past him, her face calm, but her heart breaking inside. Happy birthday, Ryan, she said softly before going upstairs. He stood there alone in the dim room, the scrapbook open on the table, the candles still smoking. The soft rain outside seemed to whisper the truth he couldn't escape that love. Once broken, doesn't always find its way back. And upstairs, Emily sat on the edge of their bed, staring out the window. She had wanted to give him a gift he would never forget. She had succeeded, just not in the way she had imagined. The next morning, the house was silent. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, warm but distant. Emily woke early, though she hadn't really slept. Her eyes felt heavy, her body weak, but her mind was strangely clear. Downstairs, she could hear the faint sound of Ryan moving around, the clinking of a cup, the sound of running water. It was the same as every other morning, but nothing felt the same anymore. She sat up slowly and looked around their bedroom. His jacket was still on the chair, the same one he had worn last night when he confessed everything. The memory came rushing back, his words, the way his voice shook, the guilt in his eyes. She had played that moment over and over in her head all night. Each time it felt less like shock and more like acceptance. Deep down, she had known something was wrong long before he admitted it. Emily went to the mirror. Her face looked pale but calm. She brushed her hair, put on a soft sweater, and went downstairs. Ryan was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee. He looked up quickly when he saw her, as if waiting for her to yell, to cry, to demand answers. But she didn't. "Morning," she said quietly. He blinked, surprised. "Morning. I didn't think you'd want to talk." "I don't want to fight," she said simply. "There's no point." Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "Emily, I know sorry isn't enough, but I am. I really am. I don't even know how to fix this." She looked at him, her expression calm but unreadable. "Maybe it's not something you can fix, Ryan. Maybe it's something we have to accept." He opened his mouth to speak, but she turned away, pouring herself a cup of tea. The silence stretched between them, heavy but peaceful. For the first time in months, there were no fake smiles, no pretending everything was fine. The truth was finally out, and that truth, painful as it was, felt cleaner than all the quiet lies before it. After a moment, Emily sat across from him. "You know," she said, "last night, after you went to bed, I thought about everything. About us. About what we used to be." Ryan looked down. "I don't expect forgiveness. Not sure I have any left to give," she said softly. "But I do have clarity." He frowned slightly. "Clarity." She nodded. "You remember the gift I gave you last night? The scrapbook?" "Of course," he said quietly. "I'll never forget it." "Well," she said, reaching into the drawer beside her, "there was another part of your gift. Something I didn't give you yet." She placed a white envelope on the table. He looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "Open it." He tore it open carefully and pulled out a printed receipt. His eyes widened. "A plane ticket." "Yes," she said. "I booked us a trip to New York. I thought we could start fresh, get away from everything, maybe find each other again. It was supposed to be a surprise." Ryan's voice broke. "Emily." "But now," she said gently, "I think that trip isn't meant for us. It's meant for me." The words hung in the air, quiet but firm. Ryan stared at her, struggling to speak. "You're leaving." "I think I need to," she said. "Not because I hate you. I still care about you, maybe too much. But I need to find myself again, the version of me that existed before I lost who I was trying to fix us." He shook his head slowly. "I can't imagine this house without you." "Maybe that's part of the problem," she said softly. "We've forgotten how to stand on our own." She looked around the kitchen, the walls they had painted together, the framed photos of happy times. Everything was still the same, yet it felt like a different world. "I'll go to New York for a while," she continued. "I don't know for how long. I just know I need to breathe again, think again, live again." Ryan reached across the table, his hand trembling. "Please don't go. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, time off work, anything. Just don't give up on us." Emily met his eyes, her voice calm but final. "It's not about giving up, Ryan. It's about accepting what is. You broke something between us, and maybe it can be fixed one day, but not now. Not when the pieces are still sharp." Tears welled in Ryan's eyes. "You were the best thing in my life. I threw it away, and now I can't even blame anyone but myself." She gave a faint, sad smile. "Maybe one day you'll learn something from it. Maybe we both will." She stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out. The city was alive again after days of rain. The air looked clearer, brighter, as if it, too, had been waiting for something to change. Ryan came up behind her, keeping his distance. Do you think there's still a chance for us? Emily didn't turn around. I think there's always a chance for people to grow. Whether we grow together again, that's something only time will tell. He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. I'll wait for you. She looked back at him, her eyes kind but firm. Don't wait for me, Ryan. Wait for yourself. Learn to be better. Not for me, but for who you are. The next week, Emily packed her bags. There wasn't much to take. A few clothes, her journal, a small photo from their wedding day. Ryan helped carry her suitcase to the car. Neither of them said much. There was no anger, no shouting, just quiet sadness mixed with respect. Before she left, she turned to him one last time. You know what's strange? She said softly. Even after everything, I still wish you happiness. He swallowed hard. I wish I'd made you happier. She gave him a small, sincere smile. You did once. That's enough for me to remember you kindly. Then she got into the car and drove away. The city blurred past her as she drove toward the airport. She felt every emotion possible: sadness, relief, fear, hope, all mixing together like the changing sky. For the first time in a long while, she didn't know what came next. But for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare her. It felt like freedom. When she reached New York later that night, she stood outside her hotel and looked up at the skyline glowing with lights. The noise of the city surrounded her cars, laughter, the pulse of life. She took a deep breath and felt something inside her loosen, something that had been tight for far too long. In the following days, Emily walked through Central Park, sat in small cafes, visited art galleries, and started sketching again, something she hadn't done since college. Each day she felt a little lighter, a little more herself. She wasn't running away from her past. She was walking toward her future. One afternoon, she sat by the lake, watching the sunlight dance on the water. She opened her journal and wrote, "Sometimes love ends quietly, not with anger, but with understanding. And sometimes the best gift we can give is letting go, not because we stopped loving, but because we finally learned to love ourselves too." She closed the journal and smiled faintly. The pain was still there, but so was peace. Back in Portland, Ryan kept the scrapbook on the nightstand beside his bed. He looked at it every night, remembering not just what he had lost, but what he had learned. And though they lived separate lives from that day on, both carried something lasting. The lesson that true love isn't about holding on when it's broken, but about having the courage to let it go when it no longer brings peace. It wasn't the ending Emily had planned, but it was real. And sometimes reality, honest, painful, beautiful, is the greatest gift of all.